Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Considering Comic Books. This is a very special episode with a very good friend of mine and an incredibly talented creator. He is a previous guest on the show. He has assembled an absolute arsenal of talent to represent his latest project. It's a project that's been 5 years in the making, and we talked about it last time when it was still in the Genesis phase. It is now past Genesis. It is in production, and it is on Kickstarter for you guys to go and check out. Without further ado, I want to welcome on again my friend Eric Peterson, and the creator of the frankly awesome series Space Bastards, which I've read an advanced copy of, and it blew my fucking mind. I was really delighted reading it. Actually, I was just telling Eric before we started there how much I liked it. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me back.
A pleasure, an absolute pleasure. So, dude, last time I talked to you, this thing was still getting made. I'd seen some of it. Now I've seen the entire book, big fat European style hardcover. It's got some of the best artists in the biz, whether it be Derek Robertson, Colin McNeil, Simon Bisley. You got Clint Langley in there. You got Boo Cook. It's just a really beautiful book using these artists that certainly were massive influences on me, especially growing up on 2000 AD. And you mentioned it, the Kickstarter. You talk about the Vertigo line. So these guys were huge for me. Dude, how do you feel getting it out there finally?
I was I sent an email to all the artists when we launched, the other day, and I was shaking writing them an email. Like, I had to write an email to be like, guys, it's out here, please, share and all that. Yeah. And then literally, like, I wanted to write like a long, oh my God, we made it, like that kind of thing, and I really could. Like, I was just like, longer emails forthcoming. I have to go lay down. I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's been something that's been a part of my life for so long. Like, honestly, since I was like 13 years old, and so actually having it out there and being able to talk openly about it and stuff like that was just really surreal.
Well, not only that. I mean, this is a project that you funded yourself. This thing has been gestating for a very long time, not just as a passion project that you've had since you were a kid, but it's something that you've put your own time, effort, money into. You really, you've went out there and bust ass, working the day job to make this happen. So, I mean, there's part of me that, wants it to succeed because I really enjoyed the material. But there's another part of me that wants it to succeed because, man, you have put so much effort into this and you've got so much talent involved in it, and it shows,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's, so it is, this is, I don't know, like a few years ago, I guess 5 years ago, myself and my co-writer and co-creator, Joe Aubrey, we really did kind of decide, all right, enough mucking about. We're going to do this as if we only get one shot. You know what I mean? Which we haven't had one shot. We started making Space Bastards films, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago and all that stuff. But I mean, this is like, hey, who are the artists? If we could choose anybody, who are the artists that we would want to work on this? And that's these guys. I mean, it's cool. We've got like our, we call our fans the Space Bastards because I think definitely it's more than kind of just a book. Oh. There's sort of there's sort of a whole ethos that comes along with it. But then there's also our Space Bastards, which is the artists that work on it. You know what I mean? Like, we mail each other like rare bottles of liquor and stay out till 8 in the morning when we actually get a chance to see each other because a lot of us are spread all over the place and all that stuff. It's these are my brothers. I love these guys now.
Well, do you know what? I got to tell you, this is one of the things I loved about it, and it's one of the things. It's funny. It's something that clicked with me whenever I met you originally. We met in Bristol. What was it, like 2 years ago?
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, and you explained your vision to me then, and I remember thinking, like, fuck, he's got a lot of really big guys involved, it sounds like something I would absolutely love, because, whenever you told me the concept, I was like, fuck, it sounds like a Vertigo book from 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Thank you. I hope so. I was so happy. I got a reply on Twitter from Karen. Karen, is it Berger?
Yeah.
Berger. I've only ever read her name. I've never heard it spoken. But yeah, I got a reply from her yesterday, which warmed my heart. I grew up reading the Vertigo books. I love all that stuff.
Dude, that is awesome. Karen Berger and Shelley Bond made that line, right?
Yeah.
If you look back, funny, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier about this. We were talking about 2000 AD. And essentially the importance of 2000 AD. Now, a lot of American readers won't really have come across 2000 AD, but what they could not have missed was the legacy of 2000 AD, right? And that
it stretched across that definitely stretched across the sea,
Oh, totally. But the people who were responsible for it, because if you watch the 2080 documentary Future Shock, Karen Berger, they talk about how she was an Anglophile. She was interested in that sort of area of writing and science fiction and stuff, and so she imported all those guys, all that talent, and so Vertigo could not have existed without her and without that unique sort of vision she had for the line. And I got to tell you, without blowing smoke, everyone talks shit about the 90s, but I think the 80s for 2000 AD and the 90s for Vertigo was some of the best comics on the rack, right? And I think it's hard, nowadays I look at a lot of what comes out and I'm constantly moaning about it being sanitized. I feel it is very sanitized, it's like safe material, comparatively speaking, from whenever Vertigo was its peak and Dark Horse were at their peak, and 2000 AD were firing on all cylinders. You had this fucking ravenous material, it was just out there eating everything alive. It forced the superhero genre to grow up. So, whenever I read your book, that's what it reminded me of. It made me go, fuck, this is, it is a necessary and a good step back to a period when comics, love it or hate it, were really flourishing and really had people's attention. They had captured the zeitgeist.
And thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Like, I that's my jam. You and I have this in common. It explains why we're friends. But, like, I have to be careful. I get really angry about the status of, how can I say this? Joe says it in the Kickstarter when he's,
I've watched the video, and he is very funny. I have to say, I love that. I love that segment. I loved it.
But there's that whole thing where it's like, it's hard for me these days to find, I don't know, like, it's hard for me to find stuff that, like, makes me so that excited as I was, 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different world we live in. I think maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I think the readership also for comics has changed so much.
It has. It has. I mean, you're absolutely. I was talking to a dude about this yesterday. Actually, we were having a very similar conversation. It seems, Eric, that everybody in our age bracket is having a similar conversation, and everybody who grew up on those comics feels like they're in some sort of jeopardy and feels like almost a responsibility to try and do something about it. And the fact that you're doing something about it is one of the most fucking heartening things for me, right?
Oh, thanks.
I mean, I mean this, and like, I never blow smoke up anyone's ass, right?
I know.
Because I'm friends.
You've always been very to the point and direct.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I'm friends with people who work in the industry and what have you, and they will tell you straight up that if you sent me something, I'm not just gonna, for the sake of it, go, oh, that's amazing, it's the best thing ever. No, I'll go, that's shit if it's not good. I'll say it's shit, and you're letting yourself down. You can't put it out like that. There's plenty of creators who will tell you that's their conversations, and like it or hate it. Ultimately, it's the best way to operate. It's how all my editors I've ever had have operated with me. They've never just turned around and said, oh yeah, we'll take it, just to, try and stand my good side or something, my theoretical good side. No, this, if something's shit, I will tell you. And I read Space Bastards, and the first thing I thought was, I can't fucking wait to have a shelf full of these, because this is just going to be, I could see the big fat collection on my shelf beside the Dread Mega Collection, and I was like, this is going to be great. I can't wait. It's like stories I want to read. It's a format I love the look of aesthetically, and it's a bunch of artists that have they've proven pull. These guys are like, you take one of those artists and they'll get me to read the book. You take a whole bunch of them, McNeil, Robertson, Clint Langley, the last time I saw him sketching in, I think it was Enniskillen, I was like, holy shit. I thought he was purely digital. So whenever you see his stuff, like up close,
it's amazing. It's totally, it's different, and it's equally as viable. Like I sat next to him this year. We did like a little pre-launch book tour at Enniskillen, and then also down at Lawless again, down in Bristol. And I sat next to him at both shows, so I saw him doing commissions all the time. Mm-hmm. And it was lovely. It was amazing. He's just like he's got like a real masterful. This will sound like I'm talking about something else, but he's got a masterful stroke. He's like his brush technique and all that stuff is like awesome. It's really, really good for a guy that's known so much for his digital work.
Yeah. You find out with the digital guys, though. I know guys who do digital, and they freak the fuck out when people question their artistic integrity or their ability or whatever. They really freak out, and it's because they may have segued into digital, but they largely learned how to pencil or paint or whatever it is the old-fashioned way. So some of those guys, I'll not mention names, they know who they are, but if they ever get shit about their digital art, they freak out. But before we go down a rabbit hole and completely drift off topic, let's talk more about Space Bastards. I've asked you this before, but what was it, little 13-year-old you held on to for all those years? What was it that was inspiring you to want to do this, that maintained the passion for all these years? And one of the things you did mention was, you mentioned that comics nowadays are like a very sanitary affair.
I think the all ages thing's kind of permeated a lot of different areas and all that. That's not necessarily why I held on to it, though, but that's definitely... I would say this about Space Bastards is that it's changed. That's one of the things about having it a part of me for so long. It's like when I was 13, I was essentially just looking for an excuse to have like a whole lot, like a comic book with a whole lot of Han Solos in it. You know what I mean? Like just Luke Skywalker. I want to write, I want to, in my little 13-year-old like sketchbook, I want to draw a whole bunch of Han Solos. And what do Han Solos do? Well, they take stuff and deliver it places. And then I think it was like, in my 20s, after I had a job where I literally was like, for 5 years, pretty much sleeping under my desk. I mean, it was a TV production job, and I had a lot of responsibility at a very young age, and I was scared to death of being fired. Like, I was, it was just that whole thing. Like, I'm literally living for work. I'm sleeping under my desk twice a week. At the drop of a hat, I could be let go from this job, and I'm back at ground zero, and that scares the crap out of me. And that kind of evolved, I think, when we started making films around then. That sort of evolved it. Like, that was the theme, was, holy crap, does everybody live this way? Yeah. Like, is this what it's like?
Well, funny, I, like you, have been the 9-to-5 drone, Yeah. I've done it, and, it's absolutely soul-crushing shit. The thing is, don't get me wrong, I think, I don't want to use the word normies, but I think there's different personality types, and people are designed to do different things, right? It's like if you take a swimmer and try and make them run a marathon, they are going to a powerlifting competition. Maybe that's a better analogy. If you take a swimmer and try and make them go into a powerlifting competition, it's going to fucking kill them, and they're not going to enjoy it. If you take a creative person and put them into a 9-to-5, it's going to kill them, and they're not going to enjoy it. You know what I mean? So
and it was a TV job, so it was a creative job, but it was just, I think I was hired, I think I was like a producer when I was like 18 or 19 or something like that, so I was just, it's an extreme example. It was one of those things where it was like, I'm producing an internationally syndicated show, and like I'm doing way too. I was not. I mean, I learned, and it was the best. It was totally throwing me in at the deep end of the pool. So I'm not saying everybody has that, but like when I emerged from that, and when it was time to write more Space Bastards to make movies and stuff, like that was kind of what came out of it. Was this is how this thing. I'm now in my 20s, and this is how this thing's going to evolve. Is now the guy who the Han Solo that's taken the package from A to B. You know what I mean? Like, it's we have to somehow rope thematically the importance, or how can I put this? The importance, but also the cost of being of your lifestyle and being the master of your own destiny and all this stuff that was pretty important to me. And luckily now everything's kind of worked itself out. I have a wonderful job, and it allows me a lot of freedom, and it's everything's cool, but I do think that theme is something that, to be honest with you, it makes Space Bastards harder to pitch in person without actually reading it or having like a physical copy.
Do you know what?
Because
I know exactly what you mean, because you're talking about it's like what can I describe it to? It's like, remember that bit in Wanted, the movie Wanted, where the guy's in the fucking office job and he's bored shitless, and he just, it's just monotony day after day. And I remember reading Space Bastards, and that came back to me a bit, but you went in what I consider a slightly more interesting direction, a more appealing direction than me. I'm not sort of trying to denigrate Mark Miller stuff or anything, but it's the thing is, and this is for anyone who's going to read this, and I hope you are in your millions. I hope this is just going to be a top seller, because it's like, it starts off with the everyman, and it's less of the hero's journey than the rogue's journey, the evolution of a rogue, I guess, what it takes to become that, and what it costs. So
there's a bit of Breaking Bad in there.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I mean when I say it becomes a little bit harder to market, just simply because, like, when people ask us, well, who's your audience? I kind of go like, hey, have you ever, like, been dissatisfied with your life?
Yeah.
Then there you go. You're our audience. You know what I mean?
Do you know what? You're
it's a pretty broad theme,
Yeah, it is, but I think at its core, this is sci-fi fans. Like, people who like, sci-fi, they like Lobo, they like 2008 Vertigo comics in the 90s, some of the, the sci-fi themed image stuff. Even I would go as far as to say some of the more European stuff, the stuff that you see popping out of humanoids and things like that. I read a lot of that stuff because it's the same format as what you're doing. It's that nice thick hardback. I love all that shit, and it's funny because I think you're in what you're doing, you're ahead of the curve in terms of what the American market's doing, in terms of what the UK market's doing. If you look at Europe, that's what they sell almost exclusively: big fat hardbacks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you give me one of those, like monthly, bi-monthly or something, I'm gonna buy it. That's where I'm at in my life. So I really want to see this do well.
Thanks, you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, dude. I've got to, I'll do everything I can to push the life out of this for you, because ultimately, a solid reading experience for me right now. It's hard to say, because sometimes you run into kids nowadays and they're like, oh yeah, I really love what such and such is doing with Spider-Man, or I really love what's going on in Image or whatever. But I remember when all me and my buddies did when we were younger was go, holy fuck, did you read such and such in 2008? Did you read, like, I remember my cousin saying, oh, did you read The Dead Man? Or, ABC Warriors was another big one for me. Or even if you look at what was happening in comics, you had the 90s X-Men with Claremont and Jim Lee. You had, Larry Hama and the Kuberts on Wolverine. I remember reading Wolverine issue 90. It was like an entire fucking issue-long fight. You'd never seen anything like it before. And all these...
There was this, even in American comics at that time, there was that issue of G.I. Joe, I think that was in the 80s.
Snake Eyes.
The Silent Running.
Oh, jeez. You know, and that shit was just fucking awesome. And then you look at Vertigo, and Vertigo, like, you know, you start off with the Alan Moore stuff. It was this pre-Vertigo when he was doing Swamp Thing. All the stuff he did with Swamp Thing is Marvel / Miracle Man stuff. This was setting up the superhero deconstruction stuff for, you know, it was about like 20 or 30 years in advance of its time. You know, we're only really getting into that properly now. So all this exciting shit was happening, whereas you look at what's happening now, and it's all like, let's just pitch this and hopefully Hollywood picks it up. You know, let's.
Well, I would love it. If it's the right thing. Like the thing about Space Bastards is that because it has been a part of us for a decade in terms of me and Joe, and then longer than that too, it's it's so crazy carefully curated. Mm-hmm. Like I can't stress that enough. Is that, I mean, even us coming out of the gate with that oversized hardcover and saying, no, this is, screw it, no, this is how you're going to read it. Like, it's you can't get it any other way. Here you go. And it's expensive, but this is the way to experience it. It's a boutique thing. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how we view about any of the licensing stuff too. I think Joe especially is extremely careful with all of that. You know, just, all right, if we're going to do anything, even a website, like even us making a website, it's just, that is a extremely collaborative process, you know, across the board. Oh, yeah. I love the website. Just care so much, you know.
Yeah, you can tell that it's a passion, you know, Thanks. And you can just tell.
I was going to say too, in terms of the like Miracle Man or any of that stuff. Like for me, I can't. You mentioned Dead Man. Like Dead Man, I immediately went out and I bought huge collections of progs after that.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, it was Dead Man. I mean, I had read ages before that. I had read America, and I had read like the Batman Judge Dredd crossover by Bisley. I had done, I'd read, you know, loads of stuff. But it was like just a funny, quick story about Dead Man is like I read the Dead Man, and it's I don't want to do spoilers here. So and it's peripheral content that comes in and out of it. If you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know.
Basically, like when I was surprised. Like when I got that, I immediately went out and spent like $1,000 getting boxes and boxes and boxes of frogs just to have just to read everything. I mean, like I can't. Like I lose my shit over comics. Like when I read something I really really like, I will become infatuated with it, you know,
dude, big time. And you know, it's funny. That's what I mean. You know, we live in a time whenever I don't know whether it's the advent of so much technology and things like that, but there was something very I don't know, how would you say, alluring to walk into. I don't know where you ran into your initial comics, but you know, my local news agents, I remember walking in, and they say this is true of guys primarily, but you know, also girls are less visually stimulated than guys, right? But guys are visually stimulated, and I always found that I had a good reading age. I was good at reading. Less so than the girls. You know, the girls in my class, you know, they were more advanced. But what really drew me in was the imagery. So whenever, you know, I came across I think one of my first ever progs was I saw ABC Warriors in it.
Which stuff? Like the original, like the original.
Oh no, this was the Kev Walker. This was Chronicles of Chaos. So I opened it up and flipped through, and I saw Chronicles of Chaos, and I was like, what am I looking at? This is just, it fucking blew my mind, you know? And, you know, the allure of this, it was a combination of just really raw, unrelenting storylines, smart science fiction that wasn't pandering in any way. It didn't say, we're gonna break this down for you and make it easy to digest. You really had to think about it, especially you know, Grant and Wagner. I mean, they had a lot of allegory worked into their stuff, a lot of underlying politics. Yeah, you could go there for the action, but there was more to it than that. So you look at the sort of tight artwork of guys like Carlos Esguerra, and then later on you would have the fantasy artwork of guys like Bisley, Kev Walker, and it was just, it had it all, right? And so those mediums sucked me in, and I don't know whether is it because we're getting old, and I look at art nowadays and it looks very, I look at a lot of art anyway, and it seems plain. It seems safe. It doesn't seem like it's, it's threatening anyone. It says, "Hey, come and read me. I'm nice. Your parents will definitely have no problem with you reading my content." Whereas, I had to hide copies of 2000 AD when I was a kid. I remember I got Dark Horse Total Carnage. It was the UK anthology, and it had The Mask, Grendel Warchild, Army of Darkness. And then the Aliens anthologies, which had, the book 1 and book 2 stuff. It had all the sort of little one-offs that Dark Horse were putting out. That was really dark, scary shit. But I was about 11 and I was reading this stuff. And, that theoretical, smart, edgy, teenager or pre-teenager in my case, I guess, that person isn't being marketed to now. There's no one saying, yeah, we gotta hook this kid. They're saying, hey, look at these incredibly safe characters, they're all fun, wow, gee, instead of going, let's fucking give them something to sink their teeth into, man.
I think here's something that I think about all the time, and I don't have an answer, but I wonder if maybe, I think these books still exist, but they're just not being marketed to me.
Maybe.
Due to the changing landscape. One of the things with 2019, as it were, is I'm guilty. I order so much stuff through Amazon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which a change in that buying behavior means I'm not necessarily walking into a comic store talking to Bob, who I talk to every Wednesday, who can sit there and tell me, dude, you got to check this thing out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think it's, I worry sometimes that I think things have maybe changed so much for convenience that we miss out on that that sort of exchanging of ideas and exchanging of recommendations and stuff. Do
you know what? I would agree with you on that. One of the things I made a concerted effort to do, because I used to, I tried to opt out of physical comics for space reasons. It became I had fucking nearly 30 long boxes of stuff, right? And if you're moving around or you're going anywhere, that shit is hard to move, right? So I was so I sold a huge whack of my collection, and I stripped it down to the stuff that I was absolutely going to come back to at some stage, or stuff that just had too much sentimental value. And I tried digital, but let me tell you, I hated digital. I fucking hated it. It hurt my eyes reading the screen. In the end, I was like, I hate this shit. I want to have a physical copy. So I went back to picking up stuff at my local comic shop, which that was another reason I went back, because I didn't want to see the comic store close down. I've worked in a couple of comic shops in my time. I love the experience of it. Yeah, don't get me wrong. You're gonna have customers who are a pain in your ass or whatever. That's like any retail. But the reality is, those stores, you could go in and there was always some dude behind the counter, and he would tell you some interesting shit that you hadn't tried.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? So
it's a big. I mean, that was a weekly behavior for probably the first 20 years of my life, 25, 30 years of my life, and admittedly, I'm my own worst enemy there. I haven't, I get kids running around, and I work 2 jobs and all that stuff. I just don't get out as much as I used to.
Yeah.
But that is the thing, is that it's there's such a convenient way for people to procure books these days that I do wonder how many are like me, where we just don't get that opportunity as much,
Oh, totally.
Self-imposed, but still,
So I totally agree. And another thing is, there's another couple of things. One is, I feel that a lot of books are quite dear for kids nowadays. So you're trying to attract, younger readership, but how are they going to afford a $5, $6 book? I mean, whenever I was buying them, they were the equivalent for you would have been $1 or $2, So you could get, if you had, $10, say, you could have bought 5 or 6 books, something like that. And
you come away feeling like your dad or whoever took you to the store, and you came away with a bunch of stuff.
Yep, yeah, stuff. Whereas nowadays you might get a book or 2 if you were lucky. So the inflationary prices, that's putting off the youth market, I think. Also, another thing is that there's a legacy audience like us, guys in our age bracket, and because all the stuff that we're running into nowadays doesn't appeal to us, we're not passing it on to the kids. We're not saying, hey, you should really read this. We're like, oh, fuck. I'm so disappointed. I don't want my kids to read this stuff. Do you know what I mean? I know it because, honest to God, I'm recommending people to read shit from 20 years ago. Oh, you haven't read, Watchmen? Oh, you need to try it out. What about something from now, Uncle Mark?
It's a tough thing because, I think it's hard for everybody to make money in comics, and that in itself is a larger conversation. But like
big time.
I get asked this by people all the time, like in my local watering hole and stuff. And people will be like, "Oh man, comics are huge these days. Comics are huge because of the movies and stuff." And they're right, but that doesn't necessarily mean more books sold, and it certainly doesn't mean more off the beaten path books sold.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff is purposefully trying to be as broad as possible because, look, if you want your movie to make $1 billion, or I don't know, whatever that's 600 million pounds, I don't know. You need it to be as broad as possible. You know what I mean? Like if somebody's going to invest a bunch of money in a property, they want to know that, hey, this thing's going to be a success or it's going to have as many chances of success as possible. Yeah. Admittedly, I say this as a guy who's written like a very niche book that is not all ages. And, that is the thing is that if there was a movie of Space Bastards, no, I can promise you it would never do as well as insert Marvel movie here. You know what I mean? It's just not the same thing.
Totally, and it's interesting that you say that, right? It's interesting that you say that because here's the thing. Definitely, you have a broader demographic with, say of superhero books. You definitely do. You've got a lot more people who can read them. But if they're bland and shit, those people aren't going to read them anyway. The thing is, and do you remember when superhero movies were all sanitary and there was no 18s and then Deadpool came out?
Oh yeah.
And everyone was like, holy shit, it's a superhero movie and it's got killing in it. Do you remember the cult the cult explosion of dread after the fact? Because no one went to see that movie in the cinemas, and then it was discovered more on DVD and Blu-ray.
And it's always one of those things that's a little bit harder for me too, because I remember like people do the whole like this movie first of its kind, and then I have to sit there and say, well, no, I mean it's a wonderful movie, it's fabulous, Deadpool, but like, have you seen this lovely little thing? You know what I mean? This is, that's the thing is that everything is, there is stuff that's kind of, rated R or mature readers kind of stuff out there that's, maybe just not as successful as the Marvel properties,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't think anything's as successful as the Marvel properties, but it doesn't mean that you can't achieve a really massive audience and a huge level of success. I mean, it's like this. Let's look at Lobo, for example. Say, let's go back to the 90s. Lobo is never going to outsell X-Men, right? But that doesn't mean that there isn't like a shitload of people who absolutely love Lobo, and I know because I'm one of them. I bought all the miniseries. I think it was Grant and Wagner did the book for a while. I read I read the series. So it's like the sort of fringe stuff will never do as well as these enormous multi-faceted, family-friendly efforts, but it doesn't mean that you can't still be massively successful. And coming back to Space Bastards, it's a niche book, but it's a niche that has a lot of love from a lot of people,
I think, I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but like, I've had wonderful, Simon Bisley's on the book, and he's in the first volume as well, and, I've had lovely conversations with him where he's just cracking it up and going, this is bonkers, this is crazy. And I think, to be honest with you, again, I have to be careful. I don't want to put words in my artist's mouths, but like that, we've had that conversation with a lot of people a lot of times where they're going, this is just so fun, and that means the world to me. That makes me happy. I could tell you, like me and Joe, we're trying to kind of make that book that I think we would want to read.
Dude,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, now, decades ago, any of that stuff. That's what's most important,
Well, you're absolutely right on about that. And I say this all the time to people. It's something I bring up all the time. look at two of the most successful, and I'm using movie directors. Okay, I'm using them as because again, people know these guys more. But look at George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, right?
Yeah.
Now you look at their two most popular franchises. What were they? Retreadings of the serials that these two dudes loved whenever they were young. Star Wars, it's sci-fi serial, and Indiana Jones, it's an adventure serial, and they're two of the most beloved franchises in movies, right? And all they were doing was saying, we want to make movies that we want to see. Because that passion translates, you know what I mean? So, you know, whenever you say, well, we're making a book that me and Joe would want to read, well, the first thing that happened was you got it to someone like, you know, a bunch of guys in the UK, and they were like, holy shit, this is the sort of book that I would want to read. You know, and so the passion
it was a
translates.
surreal experience doing the book tour, like doing the little, the you know, the pre-launch thing that we did out in Enniskillen and Bristol. I mean, that was normally, first off, like, my Europe trips are always the highlight of my year. Like, when I ran into you last year and just hung out and we got a good conversation and all that stuff. That stuff's always the highlight of every year. So I was going to be happy anyway. But then literally the book showed up in Ireland. And then so after all this time, I had never actually held it, right? I mean, I designed it, but we didn't really... I haven't smelled it. I haven't smelled the book. So I'm awake for like 36 hours or something, and I get to my hotel in Enniskillen, and there's the book. And then I've got Simon calling me going, you know, I'm at the bar downstairs, and I'm like, okay. And so no sleep for me.
Yeah,
and,
no. If he's in the bar, you're not getting any sleep, man.
No, and then it's just like fans of stuff that I'm also a fan of, getting a chance to pick up the book and hold it and all that stuff. I'll say this, is that, like, this is really, really important, is that the price tag is always really kind of concerning to me. If you don't see it, you know what I mean, you're going to look at it and go, man, I don't know. Yeah.
It
takes, like, actually, like, looking at the book and realizing kind of what it is. I mean, it is a tome. It is exactly kind of the sort of books I collect from, you know, other authors and stuff. And so that was the thing, is, like, actually having people, like, pick it up, look at, I mean, after all this time of development and all that, like, somebody actually coming up and going, oh, this is neat. Yes, here's my money. That simple transaction is amazing to me. Like, that to me is like, oh, yay. Like, it's a, like, you get it. You know what I mean? Like, somebody else, like, gets it and goes, yeah, I would spend money on this. And I go, cool, because I would too. I mean, that's exactly it, is that it's, we're producing a kind of book that I think I wish I could read more of. You know?
Yeah, dude, totally. And here, I mean, it's the important thing, and it's the important thing that you're hitting on, and I think is lacking a lot in today, and that is you're actually deeply invested and care about this thing to the point where you want to make something that other people like you can come along and read and love, right? So, I mean, you know, I read a lot of stuff, and it feels like nobody gives a shit about it. It's like they were just assigned the book. You know, it's like someone said to him, "Oh, how do you feel about doing this character?" And they were like, "Hey," and they said, "Oh, you know, such and such," and they were like, "Oh, well, maybe it'll be good for my CV." Motherfucker, you know, you're boring the living shit out of me with some of this fucking stuff. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to hijack, you know, the pimping the book. I'm gonna pimp it in a minute because I just before I go on a rant, I'll say this, right? It's the pledge for the book, and to get the book, it's like $40, right? And I've got the book upstairs. I've got 2 copies of the book actually, and it is a big fat tome. It's a huge volume, hardback bound with some of the fucking nicest art and real clean, nice, you know, paneling, and the storytelling is just aces. I love it. I love the book, and I want this to do well because I want to read more of it. And I am a guy who's been reading comics for, over 30 years? So you can trust my opinion, right? And so I'm pimping that's my pimp bit done, right? Now I'm gonna go back to this fucking, right? I read books nowadays, and it feels like nobody gives a shit. It feels like by the numbers stuff. And would it be too much to ask that we get a bit of goddamn passion? Would it be too much to ask that we get a bit of goddamn passion in the writing? Really? You know?
It's out there. I'm telling you, I don't want to put down the whole industry.
We're not doing that. We're not doing that. Listen, I know plenty of guys in the industry, and they're fucking top guys, and they're really good. They're really good at what they do. They're lovely people. But there's other stuff you read, especially all this YA shit, and it is just killing my soul. It is like someone stuck a vacuum cleaner up my ass, and they're sucking my fucking soul out every time I read it. And I'm like, I paid money to have my soul sucked out my ass. So, I'm sorry. That's just how I feel. It's how I feel sometimes. And yeah, you're going to get people go, oh, it's not for you. It's not for you, old man McCann. It's not for you. It's for the kids. It's not for fucking anyone. The kids aren't reading it anyway. They're not reading it either.
So that is a good thing. And again, this is another rabbit hole question, so we should duck in this and then duck out quick.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But I wonder about that, right? I have my oldest child is 4, and I took him to his first comic shop visit for Free Comic Book Day this year.
Oh, awesome!
And he loved it. He loved it. Like, he was crying when I took him out of there.
Oh, awesome!
And people were looking at me, wondering if I was a bad father. I mean, it was rough. And that's the biggest thing, is that, like, I wonder about when he's like 13,
mm-hmm.
like, and I wonder what he's gonna do. Like, I again, I'm not trying to be like massively depressing about stuff, but it's like, I do sometimes wonder if, like, well, you know, for me it was such a magical experience. Yeah. That sort of adolescent finding stuff, and like the first time I read Watchmen, I mean, that was all I could think about for like a month. You know what I mean? Or the first time I found John Wagner, you know, or Simon Bisley's work, or Colin McNeil, or any of the stuff that, like, I found when I was very young. And I kind of sit there and I go, you know, I do think, in my opinion, a byproduct of the movie thing that's happening right now mm-hmm. is that is the large, you know, if people work comics for a living, you know, I mean, you can't ignore that, and so there is that consideration, and I do think that maybe a byproduct of that is, again, this concern I have for my son when he's like 13, you know, going, hey, where's the Sandman of today? Where's the, where's the stuff that's going to totally broaden his horizons and make him have maybe the same reaction I had, which was, I can't believe somebody made this, or I can't believe this stuff exists. Yeah. It's so cool, you know.
It's trippy shit, and it's out there. It's like, you know, imagine reading comics during the 60s and 70s and reading the creepy anthologies, and, you know, the creepy and the eerie stuff, and then, you know, you I don't know, maybe you read Doctor Strange and you felt like you'd been on an acid trip, you know, stuff like that. You're absolutely right on. I mean, listen, we had an experience during the 80s and 90s where it was these guys who were essentially rewriting a mythology. You know, they were rewriting it, and they were forcing it into areas that was uncomfortable. They were making it grow, sometimes up, sometimes in weird directions. Especially if you read the Vertigo stuff, you read like something like Animal Man, or, you know, The Invisibles. You know, Grant Morrison was tripping your fucking brain out. It's the same with, you know, all Alan Moore stuff. He was forcing you to have philosophical conversations about things. He wasn't telling you what to think, which is a big problem with comics nowadays. It's like, this is what you must think, otherwise you're a bad person. It wasn't telling you that. It was saying, here's a dilemma. Here's how it's resolved itself. What side do you stand with this? You know, I mean, you know, it wasn't easy. It wasn't clear cut. It was forcing you, the reader, to have that conversation. And it treated its readers like smart people, not like a bunch of fucking dummies who were just showing up to, you know, cash their money in every week at the comic shop. It was saying, well, we got some smart people. And that was endemic of sci-fi and horror and everything. Look at all the great sci-fi and horror. And, you know, I was going to say action. Some of the action was pretty smart. But you look at that stuff, and it treated you like an adult. Everything did. All the comics, even mainstream Marvel superhero comics, they had, you know, smart themes embedded in them, and treated the person who was reading it like, you know, like somebody they respected, rather than someone they were pandering to or trying to induct. So
there's one of my favorite reads when I was like that age was I was really big. I found my way into Wildstorm. And there's this great thing that happens in the late 90s where I think that there's a point, I forget to call it the Sword of is it the Sword of, I can't remember the name of the big crossover, but they did this whole Wildstorm-wide thing that ran for like 15, 20 issues or something. And Wildstorm up to that point generally was kind of maybe like a little bit edgier, but not totally edgier. It was like edgy for like American comics, American superhero comics, but largely this was, you know, you went there because this is where Jim Lee is and all that. Right after the crossover, basically, Alan Moore comes on board for Wildcats.
Oh, fuck, I remember this run. Go for it.
And at the same time, or around the same time, Warren Ellis comes on board for Stormwatch.
Yep.
And, again, spoilers, but screw it, I'm going to spoil. This book's been out for like 25 years. Alan Moore totally tilts Wildcats on its head.
Yeah.
It turns into like true sci-fi, just awesomeness. And then he does kind of like a second run, and it's very much kind of like, it's satire, and it's awesome. Like, there's a superhero funeral and stuff that kind of goes by, and there's just so much good stuff in there that's funny and great, and yeah, like, very postmodern.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, Stormwatch is, Ward Ellis and Stormwatch, like, kills off, like, half the cast.
Oh, yeah, in the Aliens Wildcats crossover?
I'm sorry?
That was the Aliens Wildcats crossover? They fucking killed them off?
Just before that. He did, like,
in the one shot?
3 years on Stormwatch. Where he still killed off. He killed off, like, half that crew, made room for a lot of the guys that kind of ended up becoming the Authority and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then, basically, right before the Authority, you do have the Wildcats Aliens crossover, which, you know how that turns out.
Oh, yeah.
It's that's, like, another sort of just...
It was awesome.
Like, just hold on to your seats, because, like, you don't know... They talk about subverting expectations and all that these days, but that's like true subversion of expectations. It's just, this is a serialized format. They've given me the reins. I think this needs to go in a totally new direction, and this is where I want to go. And that's where they go. And it's awesome. Anyways, point is that like shortly thereafter, like in the early 2000s, you see a lot of similar style writing getting involved in Marvel and stuff like that. And there's kind of that. That's one of those. It's just one of those things I really love. Is like this sort of like second coming of the the Atlantic invasion, I should say. And it is like unlike Vertigo, it's like actually into like mainstream superhero big two books. You know what I mean? And it's and it's not friendly, and it's not. It's very much. I mean, Authority is not all ages. I think I could say that. You know?
Oh, definitely not. No.
And it's a huge, colossal success. It makes a lot of people upstairs nervous, but it's a success. You know, people buy it. It sells good numbers, you know.
Oh,
and
totally.
Around the same time, Vertigo was doing Transmetropolitan. And I think by that time, Preacher either was ending or just ending. And it was just like a glorious time in comics. Like that sort of turn of the century, you know.
Dude, preach. You're absolutely, you're preaching to the converted here, right? Not only was that stuff reverential of the superhero genre, it completely subverted it, and you know, guys like Warren Ellis were at the peak of their powers, especially during that period, and he opened the door for guys like Mark Millar. I mean, you know, essentially, if you look at Stormwatch, it opened the door for the Authority, which opened the door for the Ultimates, which, you know, the Avengers, all those films could not exist in their modern format. Would not have been even a consideration, because Avengers, if you remember, was like a very stale book at that stage, and the Ultimate Universe reinvigorated a lot of the thinking behind those characters. So, you know, that was Mark Millar who followed up Warren Ellis on. He cut his bone, or he cut his teeth on the second arc of the Authority, following on from Warren Ellis. So, I mean, this is where that stuff led. You know, it led to what we're in now. So, like, you know, this absolute fucking, you know, how would you say, superheroic hyperstorm that we're in now, where the movies are massive and everything's doing well, except the comics, was entirely reliant on the comics. You know, like, we need to get back to the point where people aren't just going, let's make these comics and then hopefully there'll be a movie. We need to get to the point where we're at now, where we've got guys like you out there going, let's make these comics because comics are fucking awesome. Because I want my kid to have something cool to read whenever he grows up. I want him to be inspired by something, some amazing artwork, great literature, that sort of thing, you know? Yeah.
And I want to stick the landing on this real quick, and then I want to get into something else with you too.
Sure.
Because it's very important to me. But I will say this too, is that like there is no Space Bastards without the Authority. There's no Space Bastards without Preacher. There's no Space Bastards without Watchmen, or certainly Judge Dredd, like my favorite comic of all time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's no Space Bastards without John Wagner, Alan Moore, Warren Ellis, Mark Millar. God, I've gotten myself in trouble because I've started naming names, so it's like if I don't name everybody.
Yeah, don't worry.
Garth Ennis, certainly.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that like that's really it. Is I am a byproduct of just digesting all that stuff for probably a good 10, 15 years of kind of my adolescence and especially 2000 AD, and it totally informs the comic. The comic Space Bastards we've produced, it's right now we're still making new stuff, so I hope it's successful. Otherwise, this new stuff is pointless. But we've produced finished enough stories for 4 volumes. So anybody that does buy this volume, you're not buying something that's like a prototype or an idea or a pitch packet or anything like that. This is something that exists, and multiple volumes exist. We just want to print them, and actually I want to be able to talk about these stories, because the only person I can talk to about it is really Joe.
Yeah.
And I work with him, so it's not the same, But I wanted to ask you about Black North, man.
Oh, okay. Well, sure. First thing I'll say before we get into that, get over to Kickstarter and back the shit out of this campaign for Space Bastards. Do it now. Get over there and back the shit out of it, because this I really wanted to succeed so bad. Black North. I've done so much material on this. I don't want to melt people's heads, but yeah, we're in the middle of we're near the end of a Kickstarter campaign, and I've got to say it's been an incredible learning curve. It's been a real chance to get a feel for the demographic, but also learning how to market to people and that sort of stuff. So it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. We're maybe about 21% backed, but again, to get it made was going to be like $25,000. So what we've managed to get so far for 2 small guys who are relatively unknown and totally unknown in the US, I'm really proud of us. And I'm over the moon for everyone who is involved in the project. They've just been fucking amazing. So I've loved it. I've loved this process, and I love the book. And I think one way or another, much like yourself, it's been an idea that's been gestating with me for a long time. I was lucky enough to get Stephen Austin on board as the artist. He enjoyed the material. I don't know if you've seen his latest commission he did of the Dark Judges. It's just fucking
it's great.
Blew my fuck. I saw it and I was like, oh Jesus, how lucky am I to be working with this guy? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So but it's a real passion project, and again, it harkens back to all that shit we were talking about. It's not. I'm not making this to pitch it to Hollywood. I'm making it because I love the genre. I want it to do well. I want comics to do well. I want people who love this type of thing to go, fuck yeah, I would read that. That's what it's about.
I think it shows. I mean, you have me at a disadvantage a little bit because I haven't read it,
What? Yeah. No, I'm only kidding. It's only like 6 pages what we've got out so far, but
No, but that's the thing, is that I need this thing to be funded so I can read it.
Yeah, oh dude, I know. Well, listen, there may be, if there's a Hail Mary play going to happen, it would be just fucking aces. But if not, we've got plans. We've got plans,
cool.
Because, I'm not, how would you say, deluded. If something seemed incredibly infeasible, then I would go, you know what, people don't like it, they're not interested. But as is, I think there's enough interest for us to come at this in a way that we could build more momentum as we go along. I think maybe one of the things we did straight out the gate was, unlike you guys, you've got a raft of fucking creators who everybody knows, right? You've got Derek Robertson, Bisley, you've got a lot of big names straight on there. So, even though yourself and Joe are new, relatively new in the writing stakes, like you've got some stuff out there, but this is like a big project. All those all the talent you've got involved are like known guys, and that alone would drag me in. Whereas Steve and I are fresh. We're relatively fresh on the scene. So we sort of took a punt, and I think we did pretty well considering. And,
Steven's super talented. And, like, I just met him for the first time this last, a month ago in May.
Yeah.
And, just one of the nicest dudes ever. Like, really, really just a gentleman. And I'm impressed by his work. And, I definitely... I want to see. I want to see where you go, man. I want to see I want to see kind of your vision and what you do with kind of a full, what you do with like a full empty slate of storytelling to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Totally. I mean, listen,
it's not like this is like a lot of I think aspiring writers over there kind of know like, well, if I want to get on, I do a Future Shock and stuff like that. You know. But there's also writing a Future Shock's hard. Because there's rightly so, there's a lot of constrictions. Like you have to fit within a certain thing. Black North, I feel like you really don't, right?
Yeah, well, we had wiggle room, right? I mean, I'm used to writing in the Future Shock format because everything I've written this far has been like incredibly short stories for anthologies. So like Comic House, 2000 AD, Future Quake, Sector 13. All that stuff is just compacted. You have to get it in 4 to 6 pages. So Black North allows the American format of storytelling, which is you got like like a full. Well, in this case, it was more European. It was we were going for 96 pages, but I chaptered it, so it was like around 22 pages a chapter. And because I'm used to reading, the American format. Just the weeklies, whether it be like, Vertigo, whatever. I'm used to reading stuff like that. So I chaptered it that way, and it gives you an incredible amount of space for development, which, like I say, in a Future Shock, you have to compact everything. It has to be like 4 to 6 pages. You have to get the plot, the characters, and the twist all jammed in there. So it has to make sense, and there's no room for rent. Let's put it that way. Do you know what I mean? It's tight.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing I love about Future Shocks too, and I love Tharg's practice of having people start there because it is smart. Like,
it's clever. Yeah.
I think like you have to get used to being dense and to the point in that format, which I don't know if a lot of people naturally start out that way. I know I didn't. When I was like starting out writing and stuff, like I didn't. I was, totally the opposite.
Oh, of course.
Now I can't imagine writing any other way. Like for me, it's like, all right, like do we have something important happening like right here?
Yeah. Well,
it's just wasted space.
Man, you are right on about that, and that's where a good editor comes in, because thing is, when you start out, you think you've got all the time in the world to tell the story and grab the audience's interest, right? But you see, after you've written, whoever your editor is, or whatever. Normally, it's the old kill your babies thing. They'll come in and they'll say, "Listen, you got to trim the fat on this shit. Why are you taking fucking 5 pages to do something that could, be told in a panel?" And it's another thing where it's kind of endemic of modern comics as well, because I noticed things. I remember, and I'm going to name him, but I don't mean this in a bad way. I love the guy's work up to a point, but Brian Michael Bendis took, what was it, like 6 issues in Ultimate Spider-Man to have Peter Parker in the costume, right? Like it was. I'm an emphatic Ultimate Spider-Man fan. So, I mean, that first thing. I mean, you baby walk here, but I will say this. I'm sorry, I just opened myself up to debate here, but like that's a separate thing. I think just because Spider-Man has such a legacy of getting into that costume. Well, that's a fair point.
That I think he wanted to just do something different. But
Well, it's the HBO miniseries versus the movie, isn't it, right?
Totally.
Because in the movie, right. It's in the movie you have to compact the whole thing into like an R30, whereas the HBO miniseries you get to do all the character development and stuff like that. Whereas it's good to be trained for the movie because that way you know how to get directly to the point. But whenever they come along and say, you're gonna be writing the HBO miniseries, then you can really add all that nuance. But you've also got the tight plot there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's tough. I'm a gigantic fan of I still read the first 13 issues of Ultimate Spider-Man all the time.
Great.
Like to me, the first 13 issues, like ending on 13th issue is a standalone issue where something very important happens. I don't want to spoil it again. Sorry, but that to me is like the ultimate. That is the ultimate Spider-Man. Is like that little That to me like peaks at 13. Yeah.
I meant to ask you a question. Actually, it just slipped my mind at the start of this because one of the things we've been talking about throughout here is our Vertigo as an influence. What do you think of Vertigo biting the dust?
Sorry, run that by me again.
What do you think of the Vertigo imprint being shut down?
No, I'm crushed. I'm I'll just say this real quick. Oh God, I think Joe will be mad at me for saying this, but screw it, I'm gonna do it.
Do it. Just get it out.
Yeah, if I could have any editor in the entire world, it would be Karen. I mean, if it was, I mean, if Space Bastards was anywhere, I mean, I'm in love with that, you know. But Vertigo getting shut down. I mean, the end of an era. I'm crushed, but at the same time, I don't know. I admittedly was not so totally into maybe like the last 5 years of Vertigo.
Oh, I thought a lot of it was bad. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I like the American vampire stuff, right? I like the American vampire stuff, and there was bits and pieces like I like Jason Aaron's stuff, like the Scalped series, and there were other things as well. I think I was starting to fade out around once 100 Bullets wound up, once. Scalped wound up, Hellblazer, whenever it got folded into the main DC universe, and then I guess the last thing I was sort of in any way interested in was the American vampire stuff. So what was there in the end, especially whenever they relaunched it, like none of that resonated with me at all, and it kind of really, I don't know, I don't want to say stuck in my craw. It wasn't that visceral reaction, but I remember being bothered that there wasn't anything that I could latch onto, and so
I think I mean I'm this is the part where I like hand in my fan card, but like I don't read as much as I should, and to be honest with you, I mean like it got I think when all that stuff was happening, when New 52 was happening, and also too when Vertigo was relaunched, was right when I was kind of at the peak of my company that I was running at the time, and all this stuff. So I'm terrible in terms of going out and finding more and more new stuff. And that for me, that's my takeaway as well. Is that like I'm in love with the tentpole Vertigo stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like the stuff that is unavoidable. I should throw the Boys in there as well. To be honest,
it's great. Yeah.
Even though it's not a Vertigo book, but that sort of thing where I can and I'll say this, pound for pound, I think maybe The Boys is one of the last comics that was like really exploding and out there, and like I totally gobbled up, Yeah,
no, absolutely.
I could say that. I don't think I'm talking out of turn or anything by saying like it's hard for me to think of something as explosive and awesome as The Boys in like the last 2019. I'll just say that. That's safe.
2019 is... Listen, 2019 is basically say anything wrong and you're a Nazi, right? This is the fucking climate we live in now. Say anything I don't like and I will smear you as a 1940s fucking villain. You know what I mean? This is what you're up against. And once those smears are attached, it's just... like people have forgotten how to apply nuance to something. You can't just dislike something at the minute or say, "Oh, I don't agree with you." You have to be the fucking polar opposite. You have to be the enemy. So
everything's so wildly divisive out here.
So divisive.
So I think that's kind of some of the spirit of Space Bastards. I think does come from that. Is again, there's these sort of like tentpole. Stadium rock concert kind of books that I grew up on, I think I really want to see more of,
Well, it doesn't apologize,
It's what?
It doesn't apologize. That was the
Space
first...
Bastards?
Yeah, that was the first
I think
thing.
on purpose. I mean, I can say this, enough people have read the book now. Like, I got into a conversation with people yesterday about it, and I need to be careful about this because I get too passionate about it, but that is one of the things that I should probably make clear for people is that... especially in the first volume, we kind of make it clear. There's an unreliable narrator thing here. Like, we try to make it pretty clear almost immediately that, like, yeah, like we're taking you on our ride, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no,
You know.
big time. And that was the first thing, one of the first things that hit me about it was this book doesn't give a fuck. It is not going to apologize, and it is not going to bend over and fucking kiss your tippy toes and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I offended you." It's just not going to do it. It is there to get right up in your fucking grill and say, like me or love me, you know. And I think the vast majority of people, especially in the sort of, you know, coming from the sort of background that we talked about, they're going to love it.
Oh,
so,
thank you.
Yeah.
And same thing goes for Black North as well, man. Like, I'm really excited to read it, you know?
Well, dude, I'm really excited to have made as much of it as I have, and thank you so much for the enthusiasm and the interest. And you know, I gotta say, you know, I am deeply invested in getting it out there, and I'm also deeply invested in other projects like Space Bastards getting out there, because like we were talking about, I can't remember if we recorded this part of the conversation, but we had a conversation where at the start of the conversation we were talking about how a lot of people in our age bracket are having similar chats, and the chats are all along the lines of, you know, there's nothing out there for me now that's really resonating in that particular way it did whenever I was younger. I feel an obligation to do something about that. And you're doing something about it. I'm doing something about it. There's loads of people out there doing something about it. And that's no disrespect to the current crop of creators. There's guys working in comics right now who I'm friends with, and I love them and I love their work. You know, but the ones I know whose work I follow, or I guess they're in the minority in the vast scheme of things. You know, there's even more out there whose work I'm not interested in and isn't doing it for me. So, you know, I want to be one of those. I don't want to be one of those guys who sits around going, "Isn't this shit? It's a pity that we couldn't do anything about it." I'd rather be a guy who's going, "Well, let's do something about it. Let's see if we can get that enthusiasm back." You're doing it. I'm doing it. You know.
Well, and I think, not to get too sappy here, but I mean, like, again, I there's something enriching about making something, and I would just encourage anybody, if they want to read more of a specific type of book, try and make it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's hard. I would not advocate anybody to do what I've done with Space Bastards, because it is really, really hard.
Yeah.
But writing, there's nothing to be lost by writing, and then failing and writing more, and failing and writing more, and just doing that if it makes you feel better. You know what I mean? I think I would encourage anybody to do that. Like, that doesn't cost any money. You know?
Yeah, it's free. And the old adage that the master has failed more than the beginner has ever tried always sticks with me, right? Because, like, you know, I've failed a lot, and I like to think in some of those instances I've failed upwards. You know, I've managed to, you know, learn something from the failure and take it with me, so that it became a learning experience rather than simply going, "Oh, fuck. You know, that's it, it's over, you know, what do I do now?" Instead of doing that, you know, you go, "Well, what didn't work? How can I make it better? How do I invest more people in this?" You know, so it's more that than the crushing type of failure, which is where you just completely give up and it breaks you.
No, I mean, the cool thing about writing is nobody has to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have published comics before, and some stuff that, like, I think is great, and then some stuff that is not great, and that's different because people read it, and that could be bittersweet sometimes. But, like, you know, there's been projects where literally I've written drafts, like full drafts, and like erased them, and then started over and stuff. And I always think that, like, that's the best learning, is that, like, you know, we're all our own worst critic, but at the same time, we're all our own best critic in terms of that.
Righteous.
If you're not happy with it, then, you know,
righteous.
Don't stop. Just do it over.
I hear you, brother. I hear you. And sometimes, you know, there's nothing better than someone. You know, I've got friends who are pros, and some of them are really nice guys, and will take the time on occasion to look over my stuff. And sometimes the feedback you get is really brutal, you know. But I would rather have that than someone just blow smoke up my ass and say, "Oh, that's wonderful," and try and stay on my good side. It's better to have someone tell you your stuff's shit and learn from it, than to live in this perpetual delusion that, you know, you're some, how would you say, you've been denied access to something. You know, it's better for someone to go, well, no, you're shit, you need to improve, than for someone to go, oh, you're great, isn't it awful that all these people are keeping the door shut on you? You know, I mean, I often I don't think that's the case. I think it's the case that, you know, you just have to keep going and persevere and try and get better and try and get as good as you can and put your stuff out there. Put it out there and let people have at it, you know?
Yeah, it's good. The pain is good, man.
The pain is good, yeah, no pain, no gain. It's good.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Arnold was right.
You know that especially. I was talking with Glenn, and I'm always impressed by you, man. It's wonderful to see physical change and all that. So, on a side note, I would say keep that up.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. You were talking to Glenn, were you? What was he saying?
No, I brought it up too. We were talking about mutual acquaintance, you know, and I was saying, like, you know, it's great to see whenever you do get a chance to kind of see, like, the physical, you know, hey, you're working and stuff. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I got an admission here, right? I stick that stuff up, especially on social media. You'll notice I keep my social media relatively sanitized, but I stick that sort of stuff up because it's good to post. So social media is ultimately a load of bullshit in terms of it presents this fantasy idea of stuff, you know. It's like the fantasy lifestyles and all that sort of stuff, you know. It's presenting this false idea. So you look at celebrities and you think they're uber happy and all that sort of stuff, but here's the reality of the situation. If you put out all that negative bitter shit, right, it puts people off looking at you, and it puts people off looking at your stuff. So I always try and put out positive stuff that makes people go, oh, isn't that great, right?
Yeah.
Because that gets people looking at your stuff, and if they're looking at your stuff, they go, oh, well, that's good, that's aspirational, I want to be that, or that's made me feel better, or whatever, as opposed to the negative bitter shit, which just has, you know, the complete reverse effect.
It's always nice. It's always like you know, the picture is a moment in time, right?
Yeah.
The reality is, Joe would always, like, whenever I've gone through, like, my physical fitness, you know, stuff, like, Joe's always, like, loves throwing this old Misfits lyric at me, which is, you know, it's time to be an android, not a man, you know. And that's the thing, is, like, the picture, the before and the after picture is something you can always look back, like, you know, like a wedding picture or something, and be like, oh, that's nice. But, like, in reality, when you're actually, like, in there and you're grinding it out and all that, it's not like that at all, you know.
Oh, dude, totally. I gotta tell you, listen, keep it up, because I gotta tell you, I was a big fat powerlifter, right? And don't get me wrong, I had some really impressive numbers. I was elite in some of my lifts. I was really happy with it, but it was fucking killing me health-wise. So, you know, I had to turn it around, and so now I'm much healthier, I'm much happier, and all that physical stuff. You know, I share it up with people. There's people out there who, I don't know, it gives people a positive experience on social media, but also there's people out there who maybe are struggling with their own weight, and they need to look at something like that and go, oh, well, fuck, you know, if that guy can do it, you know?
Well, I can tell you on my side, I sit there and I go, like, oh, yeah, what am I doing, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, it helps me get up, you know?
Yeah, awesome. Well, listen, I'm going to have to go and get ready for work soon, but before I go...
Yeah, I got to go.
Before I go, I just want to say, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure, Eric. I love getting this opportunity to chat with you, and also, you know, I'm really fanatically hopeful that everything's going to work out with Space Bastards. I think it will, because ultimately you've just got a lot going for you. You've got some mega talent involved, and you know, having read this stuff, it resonated with me in a big way, and I'm just really happy that it's out there. Do you know what I mean?
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, I mean, really, and you know, I sound like a fucking total sycophant this whole way through the podcast. Oh, Eric, your stuff's so good. Listen, it is really good, folks. I'm not even joking. I just enjoyed it, and you know, we'll have to do this again sometime. And next time you're over,
count on it. It's always a pleasure. We don't do it enough. So
I know, dude. I know.
And the biggest problem you and I have is that we have so much more stuff to talk about. So,
dude, we're literally this is the tip of the iceberg. You know, we're not even we haven't even got deep yet. But I'm hoping that sometime whenever you're over, I couldn't make it this year because unfortunately I had stuff going on at home. I couldn't get over to Bristol or get to Enniskillen. But you know. We will get a time when we're going to get together. We'll have a few drinks. We'll have a good time, and we'll shoot the shit. And hopefully, by that time, you know, we'll both be, you know, laughing about, those instances where we were getting our balls bust trying to get our consecutive projects out there. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, we're in the grind right now. So
yeah,
let's do it. We'll get together and we'll talk some more.
Dude,
Black
totally.
North, man. I'm fired up. I can't wait for it to be out.
So, Bud, thank you, and Space
keep
Bastards.
Encouraged and keep working, I would say. You know,
dude, absolutely. And let me tell you something else too. You know, you said we're in the grind, and that is totally true. Here's the reality about the grind: nobody wants to hear about the part in the story where you made it. They want to hear about the part in the story where about how you got there, right? And this is the part in the story of how we got there. Busting our fucking balls, doing stuff, you know, having to do the 9 to 5, working the job, looking after the kids, all that shit, just being regular Joes and trying to make the dream happen on the side. And that is just a simple reality, right? So, you know, and I believe it. I believe this is going to go great for you. So here, listen, Eric, a pleasure, man. This has been Considering Comics. Check out Space Bastards on Kickstarter. Check out Black North on Kickstarter. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. And until next time, take it easy. I hope you have an awesome week.